Hey guys, welcome back to God's Plan, Your Part. Today we are taking a look at Solomon. So Solomon is introduced to us as a man seeking wisdom from God, and we are going to be looking at this story in two accounts. The first from 1 Kings 3-4, the second from 2 Chronicles chapter 1, and then finally we'll finish out with a psalm from Psalm 72. So what's interesting today is we are hearing the same account of Solomon and his quest for wisdom from the Lord. And what took my attention today is that this was all like part of a dream for Solomon. So he was thinking about wisdom in that is what he wanted from the Lord above all else, above riches, above fame, above all things that you would like want for earthly gain. But he asked God to give him wisdom and how he could essentially lead the people of God as the future king. And so God gave him the gift of knowledge, the gift of wisdom. And from that, he also said, because you asked for these things, I will also give you riches and all of the worldly things that he didn't ask for. So that was pretty interesting to me. And then we have this like crazy story of Solomon kind of like having his first take with applying his wisdom to like a civil case, I guess. If we look at, chapter 3, verse 16. There's this story of two prostitutes who both have a child. There are no witnesses around, but when they are both lying in bed and they have their babies next to them, the one prostitute apparently like smothers her baby without knowing that she's doing that in the night and wakes up and realizes that her baby is dead. So she swaps the baby with the other baby that is in the house with the other prostitute. And after this, the other prostitute wakes up in the morning, realizes, oh, my baby's dead. And then actually it's, oh, my baby's not actually dead. That other girl took my baby and swapped it out with her dead one. So it was like a super weird story. But they have to go to Solomon to figure out what they're going to do about this, because one is clearly lying and the other just wants her baby back. Baby back. Mm-hmm. Baby back ribs. Anyway, that being said, Solomon has like this interesting way of figuring out the truth by just saying, okay, well, bring the baby here, give me my sword, I'll chop this baby in half, and you can have one half and you can have the other. And the real mother of the child is like, no, if you're gonna do that, just let him be with her, but please don't take the baby's life. And the other prostitute says, well, no, cut this baby in half. What's mine is mine and what's hers is hers. And obviously, from that moment, Solomon realizes who the real mother is, the one who doesn't want the baby to have any harm. So the people hear about this, and they are like in awe of how he used his God-given wisdom in order to like come to a conclusion about whose baby this was. So that was like, I guess, the story leading into his kingship as a godly king. So that was like interesting story there for sure. The rest of the chapter deals more heavily with like the riches and the leadership of King Solomon's people within his kingdom. So
there's a couple things. I mean, we 2 days ago we saw like Solomon getting set up. Mm-hmm. Today is like, okay, Solomon is fully king. He's fully in charge.
Had his coronation.
Yes. I'm sure there was plenty of royal drama. I'm sure some people liked him. I'm sure some people did not. I'm sure some people started producing Netflix series.
In revolt.
What is interesting, if you pay close attention to what the author is telling you, if you look at 1 Kings 3, just verse 1, Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. If you've been tracking with us from the beginning, that line should be like, huh? Like, that's odd. You're not really supposed to marry outside of your people. And particularly, you're not supposed to marry people who worship other gods. And particularly, you're not supposed to be drawn back to the gods of Egypt. So the introduction to Solomon is wonderful, except for sometimes it's not.
Actually, I kind of like read over it pretty briefly, like, oh, cool. There's like this neat little tie with Pharaoh, but like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Not good.
It's interesting when you start to see it in context of what we've read and what has brought us to this point. So a lot of times, Solomon praying for wisdom gets a lot of press.
Yep.
And
Ding,
some of these
ding,
other
ding,
things
got
don't
me
get
over
a
here.
ton of attention. Literally, so like the author is going to give you a couple zingers. So the first one is, wait, why did he marry Pharaoh's daughter? I thought we were supposed to trust in the Lord for protection, not in political alliances. Did I say that dumb?
You said Marrow Fairy's
Marrow Fairy's daughter. And then in verse 2, so this is just chapter 3, verse 2, the people were sacrificing at high places. However, because no house had been built for the name of the Lord, Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and made offerings at high places. That should also be like, wait a minute.
Yeah, what is the high places situation?
So high places is this kind of odd combination of worshiping the Lord, but in a way that you worship idols. So we've talked about that in Judges. Remember where Gideon was like, okay, God, I'm going to test you. And then God was like, okay, I'm going to deliver you. Yeah, but I'm going to test you one more time. Yeah, but I'm going to deliver you. It's like, you should have believed God. And Judges is full of that. So high places is like, you're not supposed to worship the Lord except for where he tells you to worship himself. That is in Deuteronomy 12. In Deuteronomy 12, the whole idea is you're going to worship eventually where God tells you to worship eventually. So God has shown that worship happens like in the tabernacle with the priests. Remember Nadab and Abihu? Like they worshipped incorrectly and God killed them.
Yes.
And so high places is kind of this odd combination of the people that would worship Baal, the people that would worship Ashtoreth, they would worship in high places. So the Israelites obviously were like, okay, we love God. Let's worship him in high places. And that's like, that's not great. And you can even see, I think, you can see the tension in the text where it's like Solomon was pretty good and he walked in the statutes of his father. I think it's funny that it says the statutes of his father, not the statutes of God.
Yeah.
But also he did worship in a couple high places.
Well, it seems like there's just like some interesting digs for like cheap faith almost. Like, that doesn't seem crazy until it's like, oh, but you could have just done what you were supposed to.
Yeah, and this is it's a little bit of a what's foreshadowing. It's a little bit of foreshadowing because Solomon's life does not end well. And a lot of this is a kind of a trick with growing up in church and stuff. If you've only ever heard the story of Solomon praying for wisdom and how wonderful that was, most likely you've missed some of like, yeah, but also he married 700 wives and he started worshiping their gods and he was a pretty horrible king at the end. Which...
He reminds me of kind of like a hippie almost.
A hippie?
I don't know why. Like I see him like being
He's a
wise
hippie.
and like running through the fields and like putting flowers in his
we
hair.
have this like super polished version of him.
Yeah.
And God gave him wisdom. The Bible says God gave him wisdom. I mean, it actually says that because he didn't ask for riches and prominence, God was like, hey, I'll give you wisdom and I'll give you that.
And I'll give you the things.
And so it is kind of this some good, some bad. But I think it's really interesting, and it's been a while since I've read through these chapters. I think it's really interesting. It's sticking out to me that there are just these subtle little like, yeah, but there's a little bit of a crack here, and there's a little bit of a fault here, and there's a few more flaws here. So I think we should pay attention to those because I think we are going to see Solomon just kind of making some poor choices along the way. I always think it's funny that this like man who's like wiser than wise and amazing, right? He wrote the Proverbs, and the Proverbs are so wonderful for wisdom. How wise can you be when you write all these things and you don't listen to your own things that you wrote? Like, that's just very odd to me. So it's odd to me that Solomon gets so much press, and yet his life just like ended in nonsensical rubble. So it's like, I don't know, man. I got to start to question your wisdom, bro, because...
I wonder if people had a hard time like reading that, within like 20 years of his reign, or... You know what I mean? Like, people knowing who he was and what he did. So
it's interesting you bring that up, because First Kings is written, like a while afterwards.
Yeah.
So you're reading this and you're thinking it's like a day-by-day account kind of thing. This is written much later and trying to help people understand their history, trying to help people understand the context of the kings and what decisions they made. So the thing that sticks out to me today is just that. Like, man, small little flaws, they become big problems eventually.
Yep.
It's kind of a bummer. But it is, I don't want to take away from, like, Solomon prayed for wisdom. That's incredible. He could have asked God for anything. It was obvious that God was invested in him being successful. And what Solomon asked for is wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate his wisdom did not lead him to eventually make better life choices.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
So
Kind of a downer.
I played a little bit of my hand. I'll probably play that hand again. I'm not a huge Solomon fan.
Interesting.
Just because it's like, I don't know.
Who would win, David or Solomon?
Well, I'm not a huge David fan either.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
And that is what's really interesting is that God uses all these flawed people to continue keeping his promises. Ultimately, that's what the author of Kings has in mind, like showing people that God kept his promise and that the line of kings from David is how God chose to minister to and bless the world. And he does so when they worship him, when they turn away from him. It's just like Judges. When they're turned to God, he blesses them. When they turn away from God, he disciplines them. And so God loves his people, and he does keep his promises. That continues to be true. That's also why we need Jesus, right? Like, there's all these flawed kings that are like, what? This was God's plan? It's like, no, God's plan was Jesus. And so ultimately, Jesus comes. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. He has the wisdom of all wisdom. Let's look to him even more so than my friend Solomon.
So who would win?
Who would win what?
David or Solomon?
David, man. He's got all those mighty men. He's going to be like, get out of here, guy.
But if Solomon's super wise, he'd probably have some backup plan.
I guess he could just call Egypt. Just be like, hey, get over here, Pharaoh. Guess that alliance came in handy.
That sums it up. Thank you. So I guess let's talk about your part for today. So here we are introduced to Solomon, the man, and actually super cool thing about him, which is, I don't know. I guess there's not really a high bar set. I don't know. Anyway.
I made you afraid to compliment him.
I know.
He had good things. He had good things, guys. It's good that he asked for wisdom. Go Solomon.
There's a part in here where it talks about when he was given wisdom, God said, there will be no one like you, or there has never been anyone like you, and there will be no one after you. So we started talking about Solomon, and what I found interesting about this is that Solomon asks God for wisdom to lead his people. And I think that's just like such a very basic request from God. But what's so cool about Solomon is that simply because he asked over all other things, over riches, over power, over whatever, God says to him in verse 12 of chapter 3 in 1 Kings, he says, behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. What's so crazy about this is, like, it's a simple ask, and, like, the Bible talks about this. What did you say, Ryan, the reference was in James?
I think it's James 1:3. Okay,
in James 1, it talks about how, like, ask God for wisdom. Or if you lack wisdom, ask God, and he will give it to you. And I know for myself, there are so many opportunities and moments in the day where I need wisdom and lack it greatly. But I would just encourage you today to just, in your prayer time with the Lord, ask him for wisdom. I mean, it's like something so simple that Solomon did, and God was just like, here it is. And you're just going to run with it more than anyone before you and more than anyone who comes after you. And the Bible explicitly tells us to just, if we're lacking it, ask for it. And so sometimes I know we have those moments where we just feel like so lost and confused and like utterly hopeless. But just asking the Lord for wisdom, that's what we're like told to do. And God's not going to be shy about giving it to us if we believe that he will do it. So I would just encourage you to do that today as you're praying, as you're just considering all things in your life, whatever that certain situation may be. Ask God for wisdom, and he will certainly give it to you with a believing heart that he will. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back again tomorrow, learning more about this wise guy. All right. See ya.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.